This is a video that has been long overdue. The area of Kashmir is a very important region for historians, anthropologists, and linguists because of the way it plays into the modern geopolitical landscape of South Asia, the unique appearance and ethno-racial makeup of the region, and the extreme linguistic diversity and linguistic anomalies of the area that have still yet to be fully understood. But to those from outside the region, you might not know just why this issue is so contentious to the inhabitants of South Asia today, possibly the most controversial issue out there regarding geographic boundaries, so much so in fact that you can actually face jail time for publishing the wrong map. Well, we'll get to just why there's so much tension between the two nations of India and Pakistan over the territory of Kashmir today, but first let's take a look at some of the people of Jammu and Kashmir and just how they got to this mountainous region in the first place. Kashmiris, who belong to a macro group known as the Dardic peoples, have somewhere between 10 to 30% light-colored, meaning blue, green, or hazel eyes, which is highly unusual for the Indian subcontinent, and among Nuristanis, a closely related ethnic group from neighboring Afghanistan, this rises up to 40%, but among Pashtuns, the dominant ethnicity in the country, it is perhaps only 5 to 10% at the very highest. Although the majority of Kashmiris do have a more dusky complexion and dark hair and eyes, light brown, even red hair is not entirely uncommon for the area, even more so than neighboring Afghanistan or Iran, which has been a subject of intrigue for many anthropologists since the British first explored the region hundreds of years ago. But the question is whether or not this trait is a consequence of European antecedents, or whether it is simply a genetic aberration, a mutation that developed independently, similarly to how Melanesians and other Pacific Islanders commonly have blonde hair, yet are genetically unrelated to Northern Europeans, where the trait is believed to have originated. So in order to look at the history of the Kashmiris and the surrounding peoples, we're going to have to go back in time a few thousand years before the spread of the Indo-European languages and peoples from the Eurasian steppes of modern Russia. Ancient forebears of the paternal haplogroup R1b traveled southeast from the Caspian Sea region through Central Asia and into what we now know as South Asia today, but this was a process that took thousands of years, of course, and historians really don't know a lot about the previous cultures of this area before the migration. The R1b as well as R1a haplogroup is now predominant in many areas where Indo-European languages are spoken, with R1b dominating most of Eastern Europe from Poland to Russia, while also blazing a trail south from Uzbekistan to northern India, which doesn't necessarily correlate with a perfect genetic connection, as obviously someone from Poland and Bangladesh are going to be very different, but it does show a shared paternal lineage from the same ancestors from this Proto-Indo-European homeland, even if it was thousands of years ago. These Proto-Indo-European peoples developed into various groups, the largest of which were the Scythians. Oh wait, Scythians? So you're telling me that despite being spelled almost identically to the English word scythe, it's pronounced Scythian like a Sith Lord? I swear, the English language has no rules. Well, the Scythians were well known throughout both the Eastern and Western worlds because of their vast territorial expansion and influence in the Eurasian steppes, ranging from Ukraine to Kyrgyzstan, and their physical appearance was described as not too dissimilar to that of most Europeans, as attested by the Greek historian Herodotus, or perhaps with strong admixture from Middle Eastern Iranian groups or East Asian peoples, depending on the region. Centuries after the Indo-Aryan migration to South Asia, the Scythians migrated south from Central Asia into the subcontinent, establishing the Indo-Scythian kingdom around 200 BC. The Indo-Scythians were quite influential in the Indus River Valley, and it's been hypothesized that a significant number of these Scythians may have settled in the area of Dardistan, the aptly named region where the Dards are native to, although since there are no surviving Scythians in the world today, this theory is nearly impossible to verify. Another Indo-European group in the Orient unrelated to the ancient Scythians were the Tokarians, who similarly spread eastward into the modern People's Republic of China into modern Xinjiang province, bordering Tibet. Now, it actually is known that the Tokarians had been described as having red hair and blue eyes by many Eastern and Western historical accounts, which clearly points to their origin in the Eurasian steppes, similar to the Scythians. The Tokarians had inhabited this area over 4,000 years ago, and it wasn't until around the 8th or 9th century AD that large numbers of Turkic immigrants from the north started to migrate to the Tarim Basin, which caused the Indo-European Tokarian language to go extinct in favor of the Turkic Uyghur language, and created the modern population of the province with mixed European and Asiatic features, although it's possible that within this time Tokarians may have migrated and intermixed with the Kashmiri population as well. One other hypothesis that was previously widespread among the older generation of European anthropologists was that Nuristanis and possibly other Dardic peoples were at least partially the descendants of ancient Greeks. When the European explorers first stumbled upon the region of Dardistan and Nuristan, then known as Kafiristan because of the polytheistic religion practiced by the Nuristanis, they initially believed that the fair complexion and abnormal features were surely a result of the migration of Greeks during and after the conquest of Alexander the Great in the 3rd century BC, and indeed even some native tribes in the region claim to be the descendants of soldiers in Alexander the Great's army. Although modern genetic tests do prove that around 2 to 5% of the modern Pashtun and Punjabi gene pool is of European origin through these ancient Greek migrants, as I've discussed in a previous video on the extent of the Indo-Greeks, there has been no such evidence discovered for the Nuristani people, proving that their abnormal complexion is most likely a product from a much older wave of immigration, or it can be assumed that many of the phenotypic similarities between the Dards and Europeans are superficial, and that they are merely the remnants of a proto-Indo-Aryan population that remained isolated in the mountains of Kashmir, and hence remained unmixed with other southern Indo-Aryan peoples up until fairly recently. No one is exactly sure who inhabited the lands of Kashmir before the migration of the Indo-Aryans, but there are clues that have been left behind. Although the Dards most likely inhabited this area previously, in the eastern region of Kashmir today lie the Ladakhi and Balti peoples who migrated to the region in the 8th century AD, are practitioners of Buddhism and Islam respectively, and belong to the Tibetan language family, although neither are mutually intelligible with Standard Tibetan. This gives them a far different physical appearance than the Dards of the West, but there is one other group that has stumped linguists for centuries. The Burushaski language in northern Gilgit region, spoken by the Burusho or Hunza people, does not belong to any known language family today, and is believed to have been predominant in Kashmir before the Indo-Aryan migration. Although significantly mixed with the neighboring populations, the Burusho people today retain a proportion of their original gene pool, suggesting connections to Middle Eastern, South Asian, Siberian, and other Asian populations. Now, on to the controversy surrounding the region today. Most people are aware that nearly the entirety of the South Asian subcontinent was under the control of the British since the establishment of the British Raj, and the area of Kashmir was essentially established as a princely state of the British Empire, giving it partial autonomy and administration separate from the rest of India. The region was unique because despite being over 3/4 Muslim, the last ruler of the state was a Hindu, and upon the British withdrawal and independence of India, it became very evident that a conflict between Hindus and Muslims was imminent in most of India, and thus the Kashmiri Rajput instead wished for Kashmir to remain independent, as the religious tensions in Kashmir were minuscule compared to the rest of the region. However, in 1947, the Indo-Pakistani War broke out between the newly formed countries, and the state of Kashmir was forced to choose a side when a tribal rebellion erupted in the region, causing Indian and Pakistani troops to invade, dissolving the Kashmiri government and annexing whatever territory they had captured during the conflict. This left India with the bulk of Kashmir and Pakistan with what became Azad Kashmir, which translates to Free Kashmir, and Gilgit-Baltistan. But to make matters even more confusing, in 1962, only 15 years later, the PRC invaded India's half of Kashmir, annexing a large amount of sparsely populated territory known as Aksai Chin, claiming this land to have been stolen during the British rule in South Asia. And although India still lays claim to the region of Aksai Chin, as well as the Pakistani half of Kashmir, relations have significantly improved with the PRC since. Since the partition and subsequent cooling down of tensions, many ethnic Kashmiris and other Dardic peoples have moved to other areas of South Asia in recent years, such as Salman Rushdie, who was born to a Kashmiri family in Mumbai, and this diaspora also extends to the United Kingdom, Canada, and the United States. And although there are over 500,000 migrants from the Azad Kashmir region of Pakistan in the UK today, the vast majority are ethnic Punjabi, not Kashmiri descent. As you can imagine, the script for this video actually took me a really long time to finalize, mostly because I was debating what angle I should take in order to offend the least amount of people as possible, but in the end I just decided that I'll talk about what I want to talk about in the most truthful way possible and let you guys come up with your own conclusions. And if people get offended, that's really their own choice. So screw it, let's go ahead and bring the tempers to a boiling point. So for today's poll, I'll ask you, in terms of the Kashmiri conflict, which nation deserves to get all of Kashmir, and which nation deserves to get nuked? Nah, I'm just kidding. For today's poll, tell me why you think the people of this region appear the way that they are, and be sure to tell me your own personal theories as to why some Nuristanis, Kashmiris, and other Dardic peoples have such a unique look in the region of South Asia, as well as your thoughts on the current political situation of the region of Kashmir. It really is a fascinating anomaly among the peoples of the Middle East and South Asia today, and will probably remain so for some time to come. And as always, this has been Mason. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.